Welcome to John Redmann, Power of Attorney, the show that aims to empower you through knowledge of the law. I'm attorney John Redmann. Shauna Sanford is out on assignment and can't be with us today. Today, we are excited to be joined by the Honorable Bernadette D'Souza, a judge in Orleans Parish Civil District Court. Judge D'Souza heads Division K, which handles domestic and family law matters. Judge D'Souza will help us understand the basics of how family and domestic law cases are litigated in court. As many of you might guess, the matters handled in family court include child custody, determinations, divorce, child custody, and other related matters, such as what to do when domestic abuse or of a spouse or a child is happening. Today, we're going to talk about how these cases are handled in court with Judge D'Souza. We look forward to speaking with Bernadette D'Souza coming up right after the break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm so excited to welcome Judge Bernadette D'Souza of Orleans Parish Civil District Court, Division K, to Power of Attorney. Judge D'Souza worked for many years with NOLAC, New Orleans Legal Assistance Center, now known as Southeast Louisiana Legal Services, which provides help to victims of domestic abuse. She was also an adjunct professor at Tulane Law School and lecturer at Loyola Law School on domestic violence and family law. In 2012, she took her seat on the bench at Civil District Court. Her 20 years of service to the community was so respected that her opponents in the race actually dropped out. Judge, it is such a pleasure to have you on our show. We're really looking forward to this discussion, so thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me to your show.
Well, we've got a lot to cover. Family law touches pretty much everybody in the community. If it's not you yourself affected by it, it's a family member, a loved one who's got to go to court over divorce, child custody, child support. Judge, before we get into it, why don't you let's talk about family court in Orleans Parish. It has changed. In fact, you are the very first judge to be appointed to hopefully the new and improved family court. Explain how it's different today.
Okay. In the past, you know, there were judges that rotate, the newly elected judges did the domestic docket exclusively and then rotated off the bench to the general jurisdiction.
Right. So make sure I understand you, and I remember this too because 20-something years ago, I clerked in Civil District Court, and what would happen is the newly elected judges, the brand new judges, first worked as domestic court judges, and then as soon as the senior most judge retired, vacated the bench, whoever was on the domestic court graduated up to the general docket, handling all the personal injury, the contract dispute cases, everything that was not domestic court, and then the brand new elected judge went into domestic court. So you always had a rotation of beginner or greenhorn judges handling matters such as where is this child going to live, which parent is going to have the child for how long, domestic abuse determinations. That's right. And with you, a new day has begun, right?
That's correct.
You're not going to rotate out after spending years on the bench refining your knowledge. In fact, you already have 20 years skill and experience in domestic cases, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Well, what a blessing for people who have to have their cases decided.
Yes.
But so tell me what else is going on in domestic court.
Right now, I think we are planning on implementing a mediation program, which I think will help with a lot of the cases that are not as contentious that come before the court. I also have to mention that mediation under Louisiana law is prohibited in domestic violence cases. So these are cases that don't have domestic abuse allegations.
Right. Let me see if I'm following you. So mediation, and we've talked a lot about it. In fact, last week we had Stacey Williams Marcel on the show. Talking about the benefits of mediation. Mediation is where you try and resolve those things you can resolve, not with a judge, but with someone who is an experienced attorney or maybe a retired judge, trying to help the parties agree on what they can agree on, and what they cannot agree on, that goes before the judge.
That's correct.
And mediation is very much smiled upon. Most people think it's a very good idea. It saves time, it saves a lot of legal expense. and the courts like it, and it's required in certain cases in domestic court, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And there is a statute that allows the judge to order mediation when the parties agree.
And that's RS 9332, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually have that statute ready. We will put it up on our website so people can read it. Very helpful to get parties, even parents who can't agree on custody, they can't agree on what time of day it is, they go to mediation and they can actually agree on some stuff when there's a neutral third party.
That's correct.
Helping them see maybe what they ought to see and agree on.
In my year that I've been on the bench, I've always talked to parties in the presence of their attorneys, and while the parents have their indifferences, I think the focus of a judge, particularly in family court, is what is in the best interest of this child. How do I bring two parents that don't see eye to eye to co-parent this child, so this child is raised in a very healthy relationship between the two parents?
And the best interest of the child, that's actually in the law. Your obligation as the judge is to do what is in the best interest of the child.
That's correct.
Excellent point. Well, let's take a step back, because before we get into the nuts and bolts, define for us what is covered by your court. Define what is a domestic case or a family law case.
Okay, the cases that have been coming before me are divorce, child custody. I've had a huge bulk of child custody cases, child custody determinations, child support, and of course the huge number of petitions for protection from abuse for domestic violence cases. And then you have interim spousal support, permanent spousal support, and partitioning of community property.
Okay.
All of those issues come before a domestic judge.
Abuse, it's not just husband being physically abusive on the wife, it can be wife being abusive on the husband, and it's not just physical abuse, correct?
Yes, it involves emotional abuse. It all depends on what are the allegations on the petition that is filed before the court.
Right.
And to give you a brief introduction of how a person can go file this petition is, once they are able to allege the abuse, they can fill out a petition for protection from abuse. The judge, based on the allegations, will grant a temporary restraining order ex parte and then give a hearing date so the defendant can get served and his due process is satisfied and there is a contradictory hearing.
You used a fancy law term, ex parte. Why don't you tell everybody what that means?
Ex parte is basically the judge, based on its allegation, will grant the order, the restraining order,
without the other side
being present.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's because when somebody's life or limb is being in danger, somebody says, I'm worried I'm going to be physically injured or emotionally injured.
Or there is a threat, I just got called that he's coming over to my house with a gun to kill me. You know, things like that, you want to be able to keep the victim safe.
And rather than take any chances, even though you don't know for sure if it's true or not, you say, I'm going to grant this order, you must keep away, and you can show this piece of paper that the judge signed to the police, and the police will arrest that other person if that person is present or is in fact near you, if you show that to the police, correct?
But the defendant has to be served with that TRO, because that is the notice and hearing requirement to then come before the judge and prove why, whether or not this violence was perpetrated on the victim.
And people who are in that terrible situation of being in a domestic abuse situation. By the way, I've mentioned husband and wife. It's also obviously includes children.
Oh, yes.
And if there's another adult who's aware a child is in that situation, it doesn't have to be a parent. It can be an older sibling, an older brother or sister. It can be a neighbor. If you're aware of a child being in a domestic abuse situation, you can call different family support services. Call the police.
Yes.
You can get help for this, and you don't have to pay money.
No.
You don't have to get a lawyer.
No.
You can get help for this.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to put information on our website for this too.
And the forms are very user-friendly. All you need to do is fill out all of the information and file it with court, get the restraining order, and then get it it would help to have a lawyer when you come for the contradictory hearing, which is the protection order hearing.
But you may be able to get a lawyer through
the New Orleans Family Justice Center provides lawyers that do not, there's no attorney's fees.
Right, and that's extremely important. The New Orleans Family Justice Center, and we'll put that information on our website.
Okay.
There it is right there, our link on the screen. Contact them, and they will provide you legal assistance at no charge if abuse is alleged.
That's
if you're
right.
saying abuse happened.
Yeah.
And please, if a child's health or welfare is in danger, if you're the abused person, adult, obviously take advantage of the services that they're offering. But let's recap. So domestic court covers divorce, custody, child support, spousal support. That means money for one of the spouses during the divorce and even after the divorce. And partitioning of community property and situations of domestic abuse. Or maybe we already said that. Okay. All right. Now let's we mentioned mediation. Mediation is a tool that can apply in almost all those situations, but not in domestic abuse.
That's correct.
That's because
the law prohibits mediation in domestic violence cases.
Right. That's because there are criminal activities involved when there's abuse.
Yeah, and safety really becomes paramount in a domestic violence case. Okay. And so mediation really, you want to be able, for the victim of abuse to be able to articulate things. And as we know, a lot of times with the domestic violence situation, there's this power and control. And so who's the controlling person? And that's why mediation. Right. And so Louisiana legislature passed this Post-Separation Family Violence Relief Act, which prohibits mediation in domestic violence cases.
And there's a lot of work going on right now to expand how mediation is being used.
That's right.
You're on a committee. Well, you were on the committee that this Access to Justice Committee made that was
a self-help desk available.
The self-help desk, which is huge, and we're going to talk about that more in our next segment because we're running out of time in this segment.
Okay.
But the self-help desk, which allows people who don't have attorneys to know which forms they need to use in order to help themselves filing petitions for divorce, child custody, child support. And we're going to get to that in just a minute because we're running out of time for this segment. Coming up, Judge D'Souza and I will be answering more of your questions, so stick around. We'll be back right after this.